Okay, students, today we're going to talk about rhetoric and rhetorical appeals. You might also see these as rhetorical strategies. I'm trying to remember if there's another synonym, but basically these are ways that you try and try to persuade a reader to do, think, or believe things. So you're very familiar with these because you used a lot of these strategies in your position argument paper. But you'll hear this talked about a lot. What is rhetoric? So rhetoric is the art of persuasive writing or speaking. And it goes back to Aristotle, who believed that there was a relationship between the writer or the speaker, their audience, and the message they wanted to convey. So they, generally speaking, broadly speaking, wanted to tailor their message to their audience. And there are specific ways that they could do that would be more helpful. So that's what the philosopher thought in the 3rd century BC. Today you see rhetorical appeals all the time. So I'm going to give you some language to talk about it, is really mostly what it is for this unit. You're going to know what this is right away though, because you interact with it on a daily basis. So if you wanted to figure out a movie to watch this weekend, you probably ran into elements of rhetoric. If you scrolled through Instagram this morning, you probably ran into rhetoric. Anytime you're looking at a text that's trying to persuade you to do something, you're going to see elements of rhetoric that we're going to talk about here. You're also going to see it a lot in just advertisements is a big place you see them, and places where they're trying to get you to think something different. So the previous slide was all about trying to get you to kind of, well, I guess it wasn't, so buy something, but just keep in mind that rhetoric is also used to get you to buy into an idea as well. So whether that's the idea that we should all get vaccinated, or many of the ideas that are spread on through TED Talks, or just people's personal opinions and newspapers and letters to the editor. Those are all places where people are trying to get you to buy into an idea. Okay, so of the modes of persuasion, this was told us by Aristotle, furnished by the spoken word, there are 3 kinds. The first kind depends on the personal character of the speaker, ethos. The second on putting the audience into a certain frame of mind, pathos. The third on the proof or apparent proof provided by the words of the speech itself, logos. Persuasion is achieved by the speaker's personal character when the speech is so spoken as to make us think him credible. Okay, so I put in these little things, logos, pathos, and ethos, but basically we're going to talk about those 3 things that Aristotle said were important when you're trying to persuade someone to do things, and that was showing that you're credible, putting your audience in a frame of mind so they're ready to receive that, your logic or your idea, and then to provide sufficient proof. Now there's one more that is not talked about in that paragraph I just talked about, and is talked about sometimes, but I have students say, why don't we talk about kairos that much? So kairos is an additional one. I'm not even going to talk about much here, but kairos is the timeliness of the speech. So kairos, you really have to be aware of the situation around the text to, I guess, prove that or say that that's in play. So, you'd see this in several different ways, but you'd need to explain it through further research most of the time. So just using a current example, if you used words like me too, or woke. I saw an advertisement a while ago that talked about being woke. That's definitely a terminology that's something we are currently thinking about, but in 10 years nobody will know what they're talking about. So if you're using current kind of slang or terminology, that would be an example of kairos. But also, probably more prominently, it's when a text comes out in reaction to something else. So the articles and speeches and all that kind of good stuff, stuff that started helped us think about like prejudice and discrimination that came out after George Floyd's passing. That was all timely. That was all using Kairos. It's because of something else that happened that became more in our current thinking, which obviously should have always been there, but that would be an example of Kairos. So I don't have you talk about Kairos in this paper unless you really feel like there's a case for it. You certainly can. And it is important, it's just that we focus on logos, pathos, and ethos. Excuse me. Okay, so logos is an appeal to reason. So I want you to think, I have my detective monk here. That's kind of what you want to be thinking about. Somebody who's like in a court, like proving their case, right? And they can do that with a number of things. One is deductive reasoning, which you see a lot of detective shows. One is with statistics, facts, and numbers. Those are hard to argue with, right? Another one, and this one is kind of throws students off a little bit, but things like Aesop's fables or Anansi tales, those types of things where there's a story told, but there's a moral attached to the story. So the story isn't necessarily to get your reader to feel something, it's actually a form of logic where they're trying to prove a point. So, and then I guess I just said if you're using some sort of logical reasoning, that's also an example of logos. Okay, if I can get my slide to come up. Here is an example. Back in the 2003, the UK government carried out a survey, and it was a survey that measured levels of numeracy in the population, and they were shocked to find out that for every 100 working age adults in the country, 47 of them lacked level 1 numeracy skills. Okay, that one worries me, because I don't know if I would pass that test. So, this is using some facts like there was a survey sent out in 2003. It's also using some statistics that they found for every 100 working age adults, 47 of them lack level numeracy skills. That's a form of logic, and it's kind of hard to argue with. You're like, well, I guess that's what they found. We are lacking in numeracy skills. So that would be an example of how somebody might use logos in a text. Pathos is the appeal to emotion. So sometimes you have this, I don't know, see this mostly as either humor or sadness, but just keep in mind that it's any sort of emotion. So if you come away from a text feeling, anger, or I have anger in there twice, I guess I was thinking about that for some reason, or fear or hope or pity, any sort of strong emotion, then they have used pathos in that text. So if growing up is painful for the Southern black girl, being aware of her displacement is the rust on the razor that threatens the throat. It is an unnecessary insult. So that's a passage from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. And the words she's used in here, and really what she's saying really helps you feel that anger that she feels. That's the rust on the razor that threatens the throat. Those are definitely not like comforting, peaceful words, right? She's trying to get her reader feel an emotion because of that experience, which I think is a good strategy. All right, ethos is an appeal to, I'm going to say appeal to your character, your credibility. But just keep in mind that that's not just your credibility. Yours is definitely in there, but if you bring in other people who are credible, then that is also using ethos. So on the next slide, I'll talk about some specific examples. But some of that, actually, I'll just go to the next slide. So some of that might be bringing in somebody else who is qualified to talk about something. So definitely that is included in your research. If you say, Clint Wallace, a 5-year professor of research at, some big name college says this, then that's going to help your reader feel like, oh, it's not just this person writing this paper that thinks that this is true. It's also this other qualified person. So if just including research in your writing is a way of having ethos in your writing. If you have some experience that relates to your writing and you share that in your paper, then that would increase your credibility, because it would show, okay, they know what they're talking about. So if you're talking about, I don't know, police reform, and you have a father who's worked in police, I don't know what that is, who's a police officer who's worked there, then you can say, oh, watching my dad in this experience, I've seen this. That makes you more credible than just like somebody who doesn't have that experience, just regular person, right? We already talked about the based on my research. Also using the language of the discipline. So just for this, PowerPoint, obviously if you start talking about rhetoric and ethos and logos and pathos, then that would show to your reader, oh, they know what they're talking about because they know those terms and how to use them correctly. So you find those in all kinds of disciplines. If it's something that is well understood within your discipline and you're writing in your discipline, if you use those vocabulary terms, it helps your reader know you know what you're talking about. This is kind of out in the real world, but one reason why we have social media influencers is because of that. Why they have credibility is because they're followers. So we care about what other people think, and the follower shows us, oh, it's not just this person who thinks it, but all these other people like this, so it must be more credible than this other person who doesn't have as many followers, right? I don't have this on here for some reason, but another big way you show your credibility is how you format your paper. So if it looks like the style guide that's expected for your discipline, so for English that would be MLA format. If you have all the same text size and font, and you're aware of all those different things you need to do, like citations and your bibliography page, if all that is formatted correctly, that also helps with your ethos. Also, if your grammar and spelling are mostly correct, that helps with your credibility. Okay, so real quick, we're just going to go into logical fallacies. So logical fallacies are not good things, and I really want you to walk away from that. Logical fallacies are ways that the reader has gone wrong, or the writer has gone wrong. So these undermine or incur distrust in your argument. So there are different kinds that they've categorized here. One is a bandwagon appeal. So you're saying, oh, you should do this because everybody else is doing it. That's not good logic. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. Ad hominem is a fallacy where you attack the person, not the argument. So I have my congressman here because I sometimes feel like that happens a lot in politics. Slippery slope. This is when action A will inevitably lead to B, C, D, and all the way down to Z. So that's like, if I have one cookie, then I'm going to have another, and I'm going to get fat, and I'm going to live in a van down by the river, right? Like that's, if there's a huge discrepancy between one smaller action and a bigger outcome, then that's probably a slippery slope. And you definitely see those in arguments as well. Okay, so that's all I have for now. We'll revisit that later, but before you start your paper, you want to make sure you have a good understanding of rhetoric, so you can start to analyze it and how it's used in your text.